All right, so picture this scenario for a second. You're 16 years old. You're just a kid, right? Maybe you're worried about homework, or who you're gonna sit with at lunch, or whether your crush likes you back. You know, normal teenage stuff. Now imagine you're suddenly sitting in a cold, sterile room. Your hands are cuffed behind your back. There are grown adults, police officers, staring you down. They're demanding answers to questions you don't even understand. And here's the kicker. You don't have a lawyer. You don't have your mom or dad. You're completely alone. These officers are telling you that if you don't start talking, you could face the death penalty. They're yelling at you, threatening you, making you feel like the walls are closing in. Hours pass. You're exhausted. You're scared. All you want is to go home to your own bed. So what do? You tell them what they want to hear. You confess to something, anything, just to make it stop. Even if you didn't do it. That's exactly what happened to a kid named Daniel Villegas. And this story is going to make your blood boil, because it shows just how broken our system can be, especially when it comes to protecting the most vulnerable people in society. But before we dive deeper into Daniel's nightmare, let me ask you something. How much do you really know about police interrogations? We see them in movies and TV shows all the time. The detective walks in, asks a few tough questions, and boom, case solved. But the reality? It's way more complicated, and way more terrifying than Hollywood makes it seem. There are psychological techniques that interrogators use. They're designed to break down your mental defenses. They'll isolate you. They'll make you feel helpless. They'll convince you that confessing is the only way out. Now, if you're an adult who knows your rights, you might be able to resist. But a scared 16-year-old? That's a whole different story. So let's talk about what happened to Daniel. It's 1993 and we're in El Paso, Texas. Normally a pretty quiet place. But that year, something happened that shook the entire community. Two teenagers were gunned down in what looked like a random act of violence. When something like that happens, especially involving young victims, the pressure on police skyrockets. The media's watching. The families want justice. Politicians start making speeches. Everyone wants answers, fast. That's the environment police were in when they zeroed in on Daniel Villegas. And here's what's wild. Daniel didn't have a criminal record. He wasn't a troubled kid. No motive, no connection to the victims. Nothing. But for some reason, he became their prime suspect. Daniel was picked up and brought in for questioning. He was 16. At 16, your brain isn't fully developed. Science tells us that the part of your brain that understands consequences, that's not fully formed until your mid-20s. So now we've got a kid who is mentally and emotionally unequipped for what's coming. And yet Daniel should have had protections. There are legal safeguards in place for minors. He should have had a parent or guardian present. He should have had a lawyer. Someone should have clearly explained his rights. But none of that happened. Instead, Daniel found himself alone in a room with two detectives. Detectives who were under immense pressure to solve a double homicide. And according to Daniel, those next few hours were pure psychological torture. He says they threatened him. They yelled at him. They told him he could face the death penalty. Think about that for a second. They told a 16-year-old he might be executed. Can you imagine the fear that would strike into a teenager's heart? Hour after hour. They kept grinding him down. He was tired, scared, confused. Eventually he broke. He confessed. He told them what they wanted to hear, even though it wasn't true. He just wanted to go home. Now here's the really shocking part. His confession didn't even make sense. It was full of inconsistencies. The timeline didn't match the crime. The details were wrong. It was clear this was not the account of someone who'd actually been there. But none of that mattered. To the police, they had a confession. That was all they needed. Case closed. Problem solved. Let the community breathe a sigh of relief. But it wasn't solved. An innocent 16-year-old was now facing a murder charge. The trial was almost a formality. The prosecution had that confession. And to most people, a confession is gold. Why would someone confess to something they didn't do, right? But here's the thing. False confessions are way more common than you think. In fact, studies show that around 25% of people exonerated by DNA evidence had previously confessed to crimes they didn't commit. That's 1 in 4 innocent people. And kids, they're even more vulnerable. They're more suggestible. They focus on short-term relief. They don't understand the long-term consequences. Daniel's confession, despite being clearly coerced and full of errors, was enough to convict him. No physical evidence linked him to the crime. No eyewitnesses. No motive. Just the words he spoke under pressure. And based on that, Daniel was sentenced to life in prison. Let that sink in. At just 16 years old, Daniel Villegas was told he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. Can you imagine that? At an age where most kids are thinking about prom or college, Daniel was told he would die in prison. And the worst part? He knew he was innocent, but no one believed him. He spent years in prison, while his peers were graduating high school, going to college, starting families. Daniel was locked away, watching life pass him by. But eventually, his case caught the attention of people who cared. A group of journalists and attorneys started digging. They looked into the confession. They investigated the flawed process. They started exposing the truth. These weren't random activists. These were professionals who understood the law. People who could see the cracks in the case. And they didn't give up. They fought for Daniel. They gathered evidence. They brought light to the injustice. And finally, in 2013, after Daniel had spent 18 years behind bars, he got a new trial. This time, the jury heard everything. They learned about the pressure tactics. They heard about the threats. They understood how the system failed a scared kid. And when the full truth came out, the jury did what the original system had failed to do. They found Daniel Villegas not guilty. After nearly 2 decades, Daniel walked out a free man. But freedom doesn't bring back time. He went in as a teenager. He came out a middle-aged man. He missed everything. High school, college, jobs, relationships. All the things that shape a life. And now he's left trying to rebuild. Trying to live in a world that moved on without him. Daniel's story forces us to ask hard questions. How did this happen? How did a 16-year-old get railroaded by the very system meant to protect him? The answer lies in pressure. Pressure to close cases. Pressure to look tough on crime. Pressure to deliver justice, even if it's not real. It also lies in how we treat kids in the system. Back in the 90s, the tough on crime era was in full swing. Kids were seen as mini adults. Protections were minimal. We know better now, or at least we should. False confessions still happen. Kids are still being interrogated without proper safeguards. Daniel's case is a wake-up call. A reminder that behind every trial is a human being. And sometimes the system gets it wrong. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Could you have held up under that kind of pressure at 16? If this story opened your eyes, hit like and subscribe. We've got more stories that reveal the cracks in the system and the real people who fall through them.